So here we are, final lesson, and we've got this going theory, which is that there's a concept in Judaism which is called that the Torah is one. It's called Torah Achas. There's one Torah, which means if you look at it, the Torah seems to be so vast and so multifaceted. There's not even just different genres. There's Jewish law, there's Jewish ethics, there's Jewish philosophy, and there's so many different topics. Even within law itself, there's civil law, there's criminal law, there's religious law, and and there's this concept, Judaism really is one. It's one unit. And the more they get down to it, you start seeing that really it's all one, it's one law, it's one organic system. It really all flows together. And this course really does that. We're seeing this flow between the world of Jewish values, even Jewish philosophy, and Jewish law. And today is lesson 6, our grand finale. We're gonna do this in our sixth topic. So here's what we got. Lesson 6, it's in your books on page 165. And today's lesson is called Beyond Presumption of Innocence. Okay, let's begin like this. We live in a world which is getting exceedingly, with time, it seems to be getting more and more judgmental. Right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's a pretty judgy place, this world. Like I once heard somebody say, this is a setup for a joke, all right? People are just judging people a whole day these days. I see it just by looking at them. There you go. So that's the way it goes. So some people judge other people, some people judge those people for judging other people. It's lots going around. And I want to talk a little bit about that and about the Jewish value. Today is going to be all about how we look at people, what people are about. I want to ask you a question. You got a book? You got one? Okay, one book. Okay, that's good. I want to ask you a question. Do you think that you have any biases? Any biases?
Yeah, sure.
Right? That's a pretty easy yes, huh? Anybody for a no? Would anybody say no? I'm not biased. I don't know. I'm good. You going for it, Debbie?
Oh,
Maybe you've got biases.
I have biases.
Right. Would you say they're okay? Now, when you say we have biases, we all have biases. Would you say they're good biases or bad biases?
Both.
That's on both. What's an example of a good bias?
Somebody being kind, acting kind in a kind fashion toward me and others, and I don't know. That's one.
Well, bias would be you assume assuming that people you meet in the street are fundamentally good.
Right. So that'd be a good bias.
Yeah.
Right. Which means it's like a predisposition. Like even just what's your assumption or presumption going into, or you hear about something. Somebody did something happened in the world, and there's a bias is like a taint. It's like a sunglasses. It taints over the entire scenario. What's a bad bias? What would be an example of a bad bias? What do you say? Do we need to go into that? No, I mean like a common. Not. What would be like a common?
Judging people by the color of their skin.
Judging people by the color of skin, by their religion, right? We all have biases, right? I don't think you can get away from that. Some people say, we're not going to be non-judgmental. I don't think that even really exists. Is it possible to never judge? What do you mean? We're always judging people. There's always a kind of assumption that we work with when we work with people. There's always a way we look at things. There's always biases that are guiding the way we process. We're humans. We process information. We're not machines. We're not just mechanical. And even AI, even artificial intelligence, they say develop biases just based on their learning. There's a very big. I don't know if you've heard about this. Very, very fascinating. There's a brand new area of AI, of artificial intelligence. You guys know? You guys are into this at all? Which is it's taking over the internet by storm. There's two very successful models. It's scary. You basically put in any description of a picture that you want. Any picture. Just make up anything in your mind. An elephant walking on outer space with an astronaut on its back. Okay? With a Chabad house behind it.
Of course.
Because why not, right? That would be Mars. Okay. And this program, it not just creates a picture, like realistic, anything description. If you say, I want it in this artist style. I want everything, perfect. How does it do it? It basically has this entire feed from the entire internet of pictures and of descriptions, and it's so good. And it recreates brand new pictures. It's a fascinating, you know what they've realized? The machine is picking up on all these biases. So if you write that you want it to be an Asian person in the picture, all of a sudden it's gonna start putting things in that you didn't even put into the prompt. But they're learning from the internet different biases that, there's like a certain stereotype that's out there on the internet about Asian people, and that all of a sudden comes into the picture. It's like, and certain biases, we can't even understand how it got there. Like certain words trigger certain reactions. And this is AI. This is a mind that's somehow the composite mind of all humanity. It's like a weird thing. But that's the idea. We are not machines. We're humans. And every single given situation, we are being biased. And that means that we have to be very careful. We have to understand our biases. And it's not just enough to say, I'm a nice person, I don't judge. It doesn't exist. I really don't think it exists. It's very nice to say, we're non-judgmental. It's not true. You are judging. Now, judging doesn't have to be bad. It could be good. It could be good. Bias doesn't have to be bad. Some people think bias is bad. It's like a prejudice. Bias does not mean prejudice. Bias just simply means a taint.
A tint, even.
A tint, that's the word, right? Just something which is just covering over and coloring, filtering this entire situation. So what's an example of a bias that all of us are guilty of, for the better, for the worse? I'm not saying it's bad, but I think it's just, we all got this bias. What would be a bias that all of us share equally as humans? And it's our strength, it's also our weakness. What would you say? I have something in mind. This is the automatic go-to bias. Any ideas? What would be the number one bias? Not racism, come on. Let's,
I'm having trouble distinguishing between what I might think of as a bias and what might be something that we learn is safe.
That's also, we also have a negativity bias.
Against going out alone at night, I don't know.
Yeah. Anytime that we're scared of something, we have a bias. Yeah.
Is it the wrong block? Is it our bias or is it real?
No, it's called negativity bias. It's a real thing. Our brains are programmed to look out for negativity.
Keep us safe.
And therefore we're biased to always see the negative in order to keep us safe. We see a lot more negative than positive in our experiences in the world. Positive experiences we don't really remember as well. Negativity all of a sudden really leaves a trauma with us. Why? Because we're biased towards negativity. Why? You could say that's evolution. Our bodies had to learn how to survive, so we became very in tune to negativity. The point is, you become very biased, become drawn to that. That's what you see. That's what you take out of the situation. And that's right. Here's a bias which our sages speak about a lot. All of us are guilty of it. I've never seen a human being who's not guilty of it. It's called self-bias. We're biased towards ourselves, right? Does that make sense? 100%. And the self-bias comes from a self-love. We love ourselves so much that tints or taints our judgment of certain situations. We love ourselves so much. We love our relatives. That's really an extension of our self-bias. We love ourselves and we love our family, so therefore our family can do no bad. And even when they do bad, we still stick up for them. And that taints our, right? We're not being objective, we're being very highly subjective. I was speaking to my friend just this past Shabbos, I'm sure many of you know him or know of him. My dear colleague here, Rabbi Yisrael Pinson, of Chabad of downtown Detroit, Chabad in the D. So we were talking a little bit, not even in relation to this class, about the idea that today it's a world where there's just so much. There really is, it's a hard world and so much debate and so much. We say it's a world of differences of opinion, of debate. Nobody's debating these days. It's just everybody it's just a lot of noise and a lot of emotional So he told me like this. He says, we all fall into the trap of just falling into our own belief system and our own and we think that we have honest arguments, but we're not being real about it. What does he say? He says, like, sometimes he'll do counseling. There's a especially dealing with younger families. If there's a divorce, if there's there's a dispute between a couple, whatever, he gets involved. Okay. He says, what happens whenever there's a dispute, a business dispute, domestic dispute? What happens? The relatives will always take their relative side. Isn't that fascinating? 95% of the time, relatives will take their relative side, their cousin, their uncle, their aunt, their sibling. And they'll fight tooth and nail why he is right, why she is right, why the other one's the monster. So Israel Pinson told me, he says, he always, so whenever he's dealing with such cases, he tells them, look, I'm listening to your arguments, and I hear what you say, but I just want to put something on the table over here. And he gets them to agree that you are not being objective. That's it. You're coming here from a highly biased point of view. So I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying you're right. I'm just saying don't fool yourself into thinking you've got the facts right. It's not the way it is. We're all biased. Hello, Toby. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Welcome on board. All right, L'chaim. Who said he can't say L'chaim on coffee? Right. All right. So we all have a self-bias. How does this bias play out? Here's how the bias plays out. I'll give you an example. We all know our problems. We all know our weaknesses, our deficiencies. No one knows our problems better than we do. Right? At the same time, sorry, I'm just trying to get, there we go. Okay. At the same time, okay, I want to start with, we'll do it in the books. Page 168 in the books. Take a look at the book over here. Let's go to 4 situations. That is all part of the human condition. And, whenever these things happen, we interpret them. We have an interpretation of what this means. Why it happened, what causes, what does this mean? What's a judgment? So let's get some feedback on this. Okay, you come home late, but you come home late. You come home late one day. You're supposed to be home 5:30 sharp. You make it home 6 o'clock. I don't know. Okay. How do you interpret that? How do you explain that in your mind? How do you judge that in your mind, that reality? What do you say about it?
Something came up, I was too busy, I wasn't able to make it on time.
Right, something came up, whatever,
I had a reason.
I had a good reason, right? That's what we'll say. We'll say, right? You'll never walk in and say, you know what? I'm a horrible human being. I'm just irresponsible. I have no clue how to manage my time. So here I am late. You'll never say that, right? What are you going to
I
say?
would say I have no way of managing my time. I know I don't. I'm very bad at managing my time.
You're bad at managing my time. That's right.
I will own that.
Oh, okay. You'll own up to it.
Yeah.
Okay. But at the same time, are you going to berate yourself? Meaning here's where I'm going with it. When somebody else does it, when you're waiting for something and they come a half hour late and they don't call you, you're not getting any messages.
When what?
You're not getting any messages. They're not calling you. So how do you start interpreting that in your mind? What starts happening?
They're inconsiderate.
They're inconsiderate. They don't value my time. They don't value my friendship, our friendship. They think, and it could come with all these. That's what happens. Our mind starts racing. We have these theories. And that's what happens. Very normal, right? That's the human experience. Is anybody not with me on this? Right? Is this kind of how we humans operate? That we have one standard of judgment for ourselves. And we're not, when we're a half hour late, we don't go and drive and say, you know what? I'm a horrible person. I'm inconsiderate. I don't value our friendship. We don't say that. No, we say, no, I do value the friendship. Just what? Something came up. There was traffic there. I didn't know the road's going to be closed. I don't know if I'm going to start turning off. So we have good excuses for ourselves. But then for somebody else, we right away start getting worked up about it. Okay. You're in a bad mood versus somebody else is in a bad mood. How do you rationalize that? So when it's yourself, what do you say?
I'm in a bad mood, it's for a good reason.
I'm in a
because
bad
of something
mood.
that happened.
I have a very good reason to do it.
I had a tough day.
I had a very tough day. Ever heard this? There's like all these things. Like sometimes you see like on TV. I don't watch TV, But like, you have these like big personalities, politicians who get caught in scandals. They'll always give these like funny, weird excuses. It was wrong, but it's a very high stress job. And it's like, what? Like they like right away come up with like some way to cozy it up, Like, yeah, it was wrong, but but when somebody else does it, when somebody else is in a bad mood, how do we start judging it? How do we start? We say, oh, they're moody, and they're irate, and they're right, and they're mad at me, or they're mad, or they're this, or they got to take a chill pill, and we. So for ourselves, we're all considerate, and we're this, and we're understanding of ourselves. Somebody else, we don't have that type of courtesy. All right, let's go to the last one. Somebody left a mess, right? This is annoying, right? I don't know. You had a guest over. They left before they could clean up. Well, what does that mean? You come for a guest, and you don't clean up after yourself. Right, or I don't know what, So when you're the one who left a mess, what do we say?
I had to rush.
I had to rush out. Or like there's a guy I know that on his office desk, he has a nice one of these little desk signs. It says a mess is a sign of genius. So I'm a genius, I leave messes. And his desk is a pretty big mess, actually. He lives up to it. It's a pretty big desk, and it's a pretty messy desk, yeah, full of stuff. That's what he says. Corner of his desk. A dirty desk is a sign of genius. Okay. But when somebody else has a dirty desk and has a dirty office and then leaves a mess, what do you say? Sloppy person. And what we see over here is that we really do judge and we process situations very, very differently. People view themselves inherently as good people. That's the way it works. Nobody's ever going to say about themselves, I'm a bad person. But everybody has bad things about themselves. Everybody has skeletons in the closet. Everybody knows that they have weaknesses. Everybody knows that they're not perfect in whatever way it is. But at the same time, the way self-bias works is there's an underlying sense of goodness. I know I'm a good guy. I know I'm a guy worth being a friend with. I know I am a guy that deserves to be there and present and to have a position within society. I've got problems, okay. They're problems on the side. They're superficial, they're peripheral. They're not, they're not the important part. Then there's the real me. That's how we do it. Other people, what happens is, when we don't have that bias towards their goodness, we let bad information we know about them taint their entire being, their entire personality. And I can talk for myself. I can't talk for you. But sometimes, and it's like, I'm disappointed at myself when it happens to me, but it just happened to me recently. Recently, I heard a little bit of gossip about somebody. The next time I saw him, I couldn't help but just have like this like cynical look at him. When I saw him, like, oh, I heard this about you. Oh. I'm like, 1 second. I'm guilty of the same thing. I've done that too. It wasn't a big crime. He didn't rob a bank. It was whatever, it was a small little piece of gossip. It was like, oh, okay. Juicy piece of information with somebody else. I've been there. I've been down that road. I've had that weakness. I don't go and start looking myself all cynical a whole day because I know that piece of information about myself. I know that about him, so I'm starting to look at him that way. And I was like, as I'm doing, I'm like, that's so what am I doing? I'm like not letting humans be humans. He's human. He did whatever. It's not a big deal. But this is the definition of self-bias. So we're all biased. That's the point. This also explains the whole idea. Think about like anything. Talk about being sloppy. Or talking about not managing time. We're all happy to confront our own problems. I know my problems, but I hate it. I get very nervous when somebody else wants to confront me about my problems. Oh, you're so bad with time, and you really got to help it. And I'm going to give you some advice how to help it. What do we start saying? No one asked you. No one wants your help. Just be quiet. We get very defensive. How does that work, right? Because so I'm comfortable telling it to myself. Why? Because I know that I meaning I still believe in the good part of me. I'm not going to let that when somebody else tells you about your weaknesses. Sometimes the implied message is this: you're a bad guy because of this. It's like a more judgmental thing. What am I getting to over here? The idea is that there's no such thing as not judging. We're always judging. Humans are always judging. We judge everything. We judge situations, and we classify them as good or bad, right? Is something good or is something bad? It's a judgment. Somebody does something to us. We meet somebody. What do we right away think? Is that a nice person? Is that not a nice person? That's somebody I like, somebody I don't like. Somebody I want to hang out with again or not. We're always, and we're doing this on a conscious level, on a subconscious level. So naturally, this is a very big area of Jewish values, of we're Jewish ethics. How do we look at another person? So how do we look at another person? So I don't think this is going to be a big news to you, but Judaism teaches us we have to look at other people favorably. Was that news? Did you know this? If you knew this, we could just stop the class right here. You all know the end. No. Okay. Let's read a little bit. Let's start doing some Jewish texts. All right? David Goldis, you want to give us a read? Let's begin with text 2a, page 169. And it all begins here with a verse in the Torah.
2a,
2a.
you shall judge your fellow with righteousness.
Judge your fellow with righteousness. Okay, verse from Leviticus. Now, if you look at the context and if you look at the oral teachings of the Torah, this verse is not a verse for talking to the masses. This is an instruction to judges. This verse, text 2a. All right? And it's telling judges that when you judge another human being in the court of law, it has to be done with righteousness, with tzedek, justice and righteousness. Don't accept bribery. Don't judge based on race or gender or religion or creed, age, wealth, and all these types of things. Right? Don't let anything taint your judgment in this case. It has to be with justice. Okay. So that's, if you want to understand the simple meaning of this verse, we're talking to judges. But the sages right away say that this verse also has a wider meaning. It's not only talking to judges, talking to every single Jew. Because everybody is always judging people, like we've just said, right? Everybody's constantly judging others. We are judgy people. Let's face it. So the Torah doesn't tell us don't judge people. I don't think that's anything. I don't think the Torah could demand that from us. Don't judge. The Torah is saying judge them, but with righteousness. So what does that mean to judge people with righteousness? So it comes along one of the most important books in really understanding the mitzvahs of the Torah, called the Sefer HaChinuch, the Book of Education. Book of Education is a wonderful book. If you ever want to do like a real primer, going through the Torah, 613 commandments, this book walks you through every single mitzvah in the order of the Torah, and gives you just a quick, easy, accessible definition, explanation, basic overview of the laws, the reason for the law, the rationale of the law, for every single mitzvah. So this is what the Sefer HaChinuch, Book of Education, says on this verse that we just learned, you shall judge your fellow with righteousness. And David, you could continue reading for us the next text. Text 2b.
Included in this commandment is the instruction to each individual to judge their fellows favorably and to deliberately interpret their conduct and statements in a positive light. Through judging others favorably, we will foster peace and harmony among people as a result of eliminating mutual suspicion.
All right, here he gives it to us. How do we look at people? It doesn't mean to judge people favorably. It means that whenever something happens, try to find the most positive interpretation of these events. So the same like we just said, that when you come home late, that when you show up to a meeting late, you say X, and somebody else says you say Y, right? So it's a choice. How are we going to interpret this situation? And it happens very often. Something happens, we right away jump to a conclusion, what this person meant, what the intent was, and what this, and they're a good person, a bad person. They don't like me anymore, right? Our minds are very creative at that. And we, especially us Jews, we all have a lot of nervousness inside of us. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of jokes to that effect, a lot of Jewish jokes. But then we could choose. What could we choose to have the most positive interpretation? That's what it's saying over here. So it sounds good. Ethical people like to say that I look at people positively. It's not nice, it's not ethical to not look at people, to look at people unfavorably. And then other people come and say that you're just gullible, you're naive, and I'm not, and I'm realistic. And I know that there are bad people out there. And I know that there are there are no goodniks. So I could either be a cute ethicist and humanist, whatever, and believe in all these nice values and treat people nicely, but I choose to just be real. And therefore I I look at people for who they are. So that really becomes the next obvious question, which is, how grounded in reality is this idea that we should judge people favorably? Who said why? Why should we judge everybody favorably? The world is beautiful. All people are favorable. All people are righteous. Judge everybody with righteousness. Why? Because it's a nice thing to do. So this really brings us to the next logical point of discovery in such a discussion, which is, what really is a person? This already going to like psychoanalysis. What are people? This is a big question. Philosophers dealt with this questions. It's a question of big question psychoanalysis. People are very complex beings. Some people, we all know there's people who are good people, there's people who are bad people, right? And every single person does good, every single person does bad to a degree. Every good person could also lose their cool and say nasty stuff and do nasty stuff. And every bad person also does nice stuff. So it becomes like, who's the real you? Right? So comes along psychotherapy, and there's a little bit of a dispute. There's a little bit of a dispute within the world of psychotherapy, within the world of psychoanalysis. What really is a definition of a person? All right, here goes. How many psychotherapists does it take to change a light bulb?
I don't know that one.
Just one. But the light bulb needs to want to change. Okay, let's do another one. How many psychotherapists does it take to change a light bulb? Just one, but it will need 9 more sessions. Okay. All right. Let us begin with Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud, of course, the father of modern psychoanalysis, right? The inventor of it to many. He actually had a very dark view of people, very dark, quite morbid and quite frightening, actually, if you read what he actually thinks about our species. Let's read text 3 from Sigmund Freud, page 170. And Al, would you like to read? Al Katzen? If you're up to it, then give us a read. Are you figuring out how to unmute? Should we get back to you, Al? We'll get back to you. I don't know. Okay. We'll come around. Elke, would you like to read?
Here we go.
All right, here we go.
Man is a wolf to man. Men are not gentle creatures who want to be loved and who, at the most, can defend themselves. If they are attacked, they attack. They are, on the contrary, creatures among whose instinctual endowments is to be reckoned a powerful share of aggressiveness. Homo homini lupus, who in the face of all his experience of life and of history will have the courage to dispute this assertion.
Comes along Freud and says, look, man is just a very well-developed animal, but we are a beast. We're a wolf to man. We are very vicious. We are very aggressive. We are pretty violent people. And he concludes his assertion, who will have the courage to dispute this assertion? And by the way, he wrote this in 1930. So the great atrocities of human rights of the 20th century have yet to be witnessed. And he's still right. Who in their right mind could say otherwise? Look at what man is capable of. The Hitlers and the Stalins and that's what he says. It's pretty morbid, no? By the way, I think Sigmund Freud also says that every human being deep down really wants to murder their parents. You ever heard this? And he explains anti-Semitism that way. He says because the Jewish people are the yes,
He had already seen World War One.
that's true. That's true.
Seen how cruel people can be to each other.
Right. World War One was very bloody, but it was a very different war in nature than World War Two. You know, that type of human viciousness was not seen. It was like a bloody war. It was a crazy war, but it was a little bit different. So Sigmund Freud, this is not the point, but he says that the reason why there's anti-Semitism is because the Jews are the progenitor of all of civilization, you know, religiously, and he says really in other ways as well. And because it's within the nature of every single thing to want to kill its creator, that's why there's anti-Semitism. That's how he explains it. Sigmund Freud really had a very, very negative view of humans. Okay. And he says, who will have the courage to dispute? Okay, well, there was a therapist, very influential therapist, Carl Rogers, right? Not to be confused with the Mr. Rogers. And he had the courage to dispute. And he had a very, very different understanding of humans. This is what Carl Rogers says. Let's read text 4. Al, I see you managed to get unmuted, so go for it.
Text 4?
Text 4.
Okay. One of the most revolutionary concepts to grow out of our clinical experience is the growing recognition that the innermost core of man's nature, the deepest layers of his personality, the basis of his animal nature is positive in nature, is basically socialized, forward-moving, rational, and realistic.
There we have it. And he says is that if you dig deep down enough, what are you going to find? Really, the basis of all the animal nature is socialized, forward-moving, rational, realistic. That's a beautiful description. That's such a generous description of mankind, no? So we have these two very, very big opposites over here that Carl Rogers says. He says, if you look at people, you'll see that at their essence, they're good people. If you look at history, even if you look at the arc of history, and, you know, and because we have the negativity bias, so we always focus on the negativity. What about all this? All in all, you'll see that history is a story of human progress and morality and ethics. And yes, with all the bumps in the way, there's an upward curve. This is Carl Rogers' assertion. And of course, we're not here to take a side on a debate in the world of psychoanalysis or in the world of psychology. Oh, sorry, the world of philosophy, because really this debate as well also exists on a philosophical level. There's also, you know, political science deals a lot with this also. What are human beings? And that's really becomes the basis of a lot of the different models of a society, of capitalism or socialism, communism. What does Judaism say? How does Judaism see a person? And it's basically this question of what's the balance? How do we define the goodness within people and the evil within people? So Judaism has a very, very strong stance. Judaism is adamant that people are pure. A person is pure. A person is good. And it actually becomes a daily affirmation that we say. You know, some parents, like a little bit of like a modern shtick. They do like a daily mantra with their kids, right? I am brave, I am courageous, I'm this. You know, like you do like one of these, like, you know, you get a kid pumped up every day. And in a certain way, Judaism has that too. Part of our prayer sometimes is like a lot of like very affirming statements. Like Modani. So this is from right after Modani. Right after.
And the Shamat Horahi.
And the Shamat Horahi. Our soul is pure. Let's read text 7. All right? Toby, would you like to read text 7? Page 175. We're skipping a little bit. You got to unmute, Toby.
Okay.
There you go.
Well, my God, the soul that you have placed in me is pure. You created it, you formed it, you breathed it into me, and you preserve it within me.
We have a soul. The soul is the essence of who we are. That is the core of your identity. And what is that core? It's pure. God created it, God formed it, God breathes it into us, God preserves it within us. Okay, that's a beautiful statement, but we all know that we human beings are not walking angels. We all are capable of some nasty stuff. And it happens a lot, right? Not only are we capable, but we do it. I'm not talking about anything too crazy, but a negative thought, a negative speech, a little negative act, right? Is this just me that has a little bit of negativity in me, or it's we all share that condition? So how do you define the negativity if we are pure people? So the Talmud says something. If you think about it, it is such a wild statement. It's wild. For the Talmud to speak this way is unbelievable. The ramifications of this idea are crazy. Let's read text 8. And Toby, you can read this text too. Text 8, page 176. Comes the Talmud and says like this.
People only transgress when they are overcome by a spirit of foolishness.
Well, so the Talmud says, the English translation actually is not so good. The Talmud says a person will never commit a sin unless something, it says nichnas bo, something comes into them, like a virus. Like a virus has to enter your system. So there's like some foreign parasitic force, which we call the spirit of foolishness. And the spirit of foolishness is what lets us lose our minds for a minute and lets us lose our sense of judgment. And it makes us be a little bit foolish temporarily. Like sometimes we do something and like a minute later we're like, how was I so stupid? So that's not natural to the human condition. Humans are not meant to have those like momentary lapses of bad judgment, of foolishness, of short-sightedness. That is an exterior spirit that somehow comes into us, literally like a virus, called spirit of foolishness. And that is the source of our negativity. Yeah. You could say it's Yetzer Hara. Yeah. So how does that fit in with that model? But this idea, for a human being, for a Jew, to do something negative is extraneous. It's not part of our existence. It's not natural. Naturally, we're good and pure. But there's a condition we all suffer from, just like COVID. I guess it's pretty easy to catch. And then becomes this entire topic of within Jewish spirituality. How do you catch? How could you become contagious to this spirit? It's like this weird spirit of foolishness. How could you overcome it? How could you become immune to it? Right? So this is an entire area of Jewish spirituality. The spirit of foolishness. But this idea, according to Judaism has this very beautiful view of people. Every single person is pure. When a baby comes out and emerges from the womb, this is a beautiful, pure, and holy person. Now we all know this baby is probably going to do a lot of negative stuff in their life. It's not going to be a saint. But we just always have to know that is always an aversion from their true essence. The true essence is good. And this becomes the basis of how Judaism sees people. Judaism sees people as good at their essence. Anything negative is this exterior, extraneous force that is somehow pulling this person away from their essential being. That's Judaism's version of it, which is quite unbelievable. That's a very generous view of people. Yeah.
If we have such a generous view, why have there in ancient times maybe were there such harsh punishments?
Why there's such harsh punishments?
People swaying from.
Well, first of all, I'm not sure.
Like stoning, for adultery.
Okay, so why was there stoning? You're saying in ancient civilizations or according to Jewish law? Okay, so Jewish law has a whole set of punishments, but you should just know none of those punishments really make a lot of sense, which means these are God prescribed punishments, and these punishments were not a way of just expressing vengeance or wrath. God's wrath. We're going to kill you. We're going to this, but it was actually a form of cleansing, of rehabilitation. And we don't fully understand why certain punishments are given for certain things. But the idea of punishment makes sense. At the end of the day, you're a man of free choice. You made a thing. Yeah. So, right. Why certain ones? Yeah. I don't know. Meaning which ones? Especially when it comes to death sentences. That's God's business. It was never, that was God prescribed when and how. This Jewish view becomes the basis of how we look at people. And at this point, I want to move into law. Okay, I want to now segue into law. This is the Jewish value. How do we look at people and why we look at people that way? Judaism doesn't just say it's a nice thing to look at people righteously. Judaism says that's the truth. We're telling you to treat people that way, to judge people that way, because that is the truth. Okay. From a legal perspective, how does this apply? How does this attitude of people become a legal principle? Well, let's begin like this. If we're going to talk about law, okay, so Stuart, my in-house lawyer in residence. Does American law have a standard view of people that they look at? Is there a certain bias or starting point of how we look at people?
In the criminal law, there's the presumption of innocence.
Oh, there's a presumption of innocence in criminal law.
Right.
Right.
And properly no particular presumption. And there's also no presumption that any particular person, by their status, their stature, their occupation, is entitled to more deference in their testimony than any other person. So
Right.
they ask a juror, would you, all else equal, you are not allowed to tell me, not allowed to hold a policeman's testimony in higher regard than that of a.
Just because they're police,
Yeah,
right?
just because of that.
So to be treated as a human being equally, and there's a presumption of innocence. So there is a certain presumption in law that every person, if they're walking into a case, they're being tried for a criminal charge, there's a presumption of innocence, which means, very simply, every American citizen is protected by constitutionally protected for their civil liberties, right? For the state to now come and violate your civil liberties by punishing you in this criminal case, taking away your money, locking you up in jail, or whatever other punishments you're going to have to deal with, they carry the burden of proof. That's what it means, presumption of innocence, which means unless the state can produce enough proof that will convincingly prove the jury, right, beyond reasonable doubt, that this person is guilty, unless they could prove that, this person is always going to be innocent. Okay, but here's my question for you. Does presumption of innocence take a position on this debate? What are people essentially? Are they good people or are they bad people? Does the principle of presumption of innocence take a position on this issue?
No.
Someone just said no. Who said no?
Toby.
Oh, explain yourself, Toby. Why not?
I think that we just like to think that everybody is good person and innocent until you can prove it.
So you're saying it's not that we're saying that people are good. We're just simply saying that we don't want to, we need to begin by the presumption that everybody's innocent. And
Otherwise, it'll be ripe for abuse. Anybody could point a finger at, for whatever reason, a personal enemy, and they would have a leg up in trying to get that person punished pointlessly.
Right. You're saying you could just with a story and just with hearsay, somebody could just say something and that's it.
A societal point, I think, more than an individual point, is that we don't want to put the onus on somebody simply because somebody points a finger at them, because that would invite, animus, and successfully invite animus, with or without reason,
Right. You're saying that at the end of the day, the United States court system and legal system is based on the idea that we are here to protect citizens' rights. We are not going to violate your rights and your civil liberties unless we have good proof. So we're not saying that you're a good person or a bad person. We're simply saying that we will refuse to strip you of your rights unless we have very solid reason to do it. But we can have somebody who walks into the courthouse and we know for a fact they're a bad person. They're a gangster, they have a history, they have tattoos from head to foot. Is that a prejudice? Am I being biased right now against people with tattoos? I am. Okay, yeah, that's right. There you go. I've got some biases to deal with. Okay. But, and we're not saying that this person is innocent. We actually probably do think that they, a good chance they did it. But this man's walking free unless we could produce the evidence. So we're not talking so much about the nature of the person as much as we're talking about the burden of proof that we want to have in place as a society before we convict somebody, before we strip somebody of their liberties. So that's the presumption of innocence. Judaism has within the legal system, is a presumption of innocence. Comes Judaism. And Judaism also has in the court system a presumption of innocence. You cannot convict somebody without proof. Okay, that's really the basis, the most basic rule of having courts of law, honest courts of law, right? This cannot be a case where you can just abuse people. Okay, comes along Judaism, and Judaism has an unbelievable rule. Not just presumption of innocence. There's a legal principle called a presumption of righteousness. Presumption of righteousness. In the words of our sages, Kol Yisrael becheskas kashrus. Every Jew has a presumption of being righteous. And that's just not an ethical saying, that's a legal statement with a lot of big ramifications. And I want to introduce you to a halachic term. Okay, I'm now going to make, if you ever open up the Talmud again, what I'm about to teach you right now is going to make things a lot easier. All right? One of the first things that's very good to do before you learn Talmud. By the way, I have a very deep desire, and I need to see, maybe I'll do it. It'll be a project for next year to do a weekly Talmud class. And this won't be a course. It'll be legit, line by line, page by page study of Talmud. If anyone's interested, by the way, just let me know. Drop me an email, and maybe we'll see. If there's interest, it could be a real fun ride. Okay. In the Talmud, there is a legal term, a legal principle. That legal word is called chazaka. Last week I introduced you to the concept of yiush. You remember that? About yiush? When somebody despairs over possession, they give up, right? That's a concept. Yiush. It's a word you'll find a lot in certain subjects in the Talmud. This is an even more important word. Chazaka, this term. Chazaka means a legal presumption, a legal status quo. And really, everything needs to begin with a legal starting point. And the starting point, the way, how by default law will deal with this case is the chazaka. The word chazaka comes from the Hebrew word chazak, which means strength, like a firm hold. So legally, there's an entrenched legal hold on this case, person, situation, anything, which is a chazaka. What's an example of a chazaka? A chazaka is that somebody who's living in a house, there's a chazaka, a legal presumption that the house is theirs, or that they have legal rights to live there. Not if they live there for one day, but if they live there for 3 years. If someone's living in a house for 3 years, boom, there's a legal chazaka.
Rebuttable presumption.
Of course, you could disprove it, but the starting point is going to be a chazaka. Here's another one. A couple who lives together. They live together. For how much time? That's a good question. How long does it take until the chazaka kicks in? Let's say there's a couple living together and there's no proof that they ever got married to each other. There's no proof anything. There's a chazaka that they are married. It's a legal presumption. And again, it's not just because we need presumptions. There's a lot of legal ramifications where you need a presumption to work off of. And it really always works with what naturally is the circumstance over here, what is the default position over here. And the chazaka does not just mean a presumption. It means that this is the firm reality we work within. In order to remove this situation from its chazaka, we need solid proof. There needs to be something solid that removes a chazaka. That's the way it works. A chazaka is very real. And it's a legal principle. If something has a chazaka, that becomes a very strong position. And legally, you need a strong proof, right, in order to remove it from its current status of a chazaka. So for example, if somebody comes, this is the example in Talmud. Okay, I'm just going to give you an example. There's thousands of examples of where chazaka is used within the context of a case. But here's an example. If a woman who lives with another man is seduced by another man, which is of course a massive sin, massive violation on multiple levels. Okay. There's a difference legally. If you seduce a woman who is married versus a woman who is not married and is single, there's a difference. Both crimes, both sins, difference. What if the seducer, the offender, comes to the court and says, "You're trying me as if I seduced a married woman"? I've got news for you. She's not even married to him. They're not married. And let's say the court start going through the records and they see there's no marriage record. The court has no marriage record that these two people ever got married. And the court asks them, do you have a ksuba? Do you have something to provide? They said, we don't have any. Even if there's no proof that they're married, the fact that they live together means legally we're going to work within the framework that they are married. Unless there's proof, real proof, that says otherwise. And that's just the way law needs to work. It needs to be presumptions, and that's called a chazakah. We always begin with this. Okay, one more example, because this is an important example for what I'm going to get to. If you go to a farm and you see cows, cattle, oxen, and animals, a cow has meat on them, right? Walking machines of meat. Is that meat kosher?
It could be.
Oh, it could be, but it's not at the moment. Not at the moment.
Wasn't
It wasn't shechted. It wasn't slaughtered. So when you go to a cat, when you go in general, what is the chazakah of meat? What is the chazakah of meat? Any meat. Presumed not kosher. There's a chazakah, meat is not kosher. Why? Because that is the natural starting point of every single piece of meat. Every piece of meat was first not kosher, and then maybe circumstantially became kosher. But that's only certain cases. So when I walk into Kroger and I see meat, it's not maybe it is kosher, maybe it's not kosher. No, there's a chazakah in place. There's no maybe. This becomes reality. The reality is meat's not kosher, that we have to work with that presumption. So the only way to remove that chazakah, this presumption, this legal presumption, that meat is not kosher, is that there's clear proof that it was slaughtered. And now the old chazakah falls out, and now it's moved into a new category. Any meat that's slaughtered has a chazakah, it's kosher. Now there's a new chazakah. So when I go to the Grove, right? Formerly One Stop, and there's meat there, and it says it's kosher. I don't walk in and say, I think most is kosher. Maybe some is not kosher. Why? Because even if we're slaughtered, some cows could have certain inner defects that make the meat not kosher, and maybe they didn't find it, so maybe some of it's not kosher. No, the chazakah is slaughtered meat is kosher, unless proven otherwise. There's no maybes. A chazakah becomes the legal reality we work with it. Slaughtered meat is kosher, as long as it's so. The starting point of meat is not kosher, unless proven otherwise. Okay, so chazakah is not just a word. It's a legal principle, which means this becomes reality, unless proven otherwise. Our sages say something unbelievable. We have to think about what this means. Every Jew has a chazakah of, the Hebrew word is kashrut, which means like kosher, but it means righteousness. Every Jew is righteous. A chazakah. What does chazakah mean? Chazakah doesn't mean maybe yes, maybe no. Chazakah means this is reality. Every Jew, the default position of every single Jew, and I'm saying Jew because Jewish law is talking within the context of Jews, but to my understanding, Judaism says about all people, but especially about Jewish people. Every Jew is righteous. That is a legal presumption, not an assumption, a presumption. This becomes a legal principle we work with. Every Jew is righteous, unless proven otherwise. We're not saying that there's, oh no, we're going to close our ears. No one did anything wrong. No, if we could prove that this person is a thief, is a swindler, is a murderer, or whatever, then they're going to lose that chazakah, just like a piece of meat. Once it's proven that it was slaughtered, right, moves into a new category. But the starting point of every human being is 100% righteous. How comes a legal principle? Why? This legal principle is based on Jewish values, because every single Jew has a soul. And any negativity that a Jew ever does is really an extraneous force that somehow got into their system and is hijacking their internal system. But really, the internal system, their essential being, is perfect, is good. So Jewish law makes a chazaka. It's such a powerful concept. Let's read this in text 6, and then we're going to go to the law. We're going to see how Jewish law starts applying this principle. So this is the principle. We're going to go back a little bit. Text 6. Lisa, would you like to read?
I would love to read, but I brought the wrong book up north.
Which book do you have? Which course are you holding by?
Decoded.
Oh, wow. That was a good course.
Sorry, I grabbed the wrong one.
That's fine. Judaism, that was a good course. We did that last summer, right? Judaism Decoded. Okay. So let us go to text 6 and let's start moving into this room. Would you like to read, Stuart? Yeah, sure. Text 6, page 173.
Presumption of righteousness. It is clear and established that we are all presumed to be righteous. It is analogous to presumptions we use regarding the kosher status of animals. As long as an animal is alive, it is forbidden for consumption, and it is presumed to have remained in this state until we can ascertain that it has been slaughtered properly. Once the animal has been slaughtered properly, it is then presumed to be kosher, unless there is clearly proven to be non-kosher due to a severe physical defect. Similarly, God created each of us upright and honest by nature, who will retain this presumption of righteousness unless it has been clearly proven that they have chosen to veer from the way of truth and righteousness and follow a deceitful and crooked path.
Very powerful. God created us all righteous. We're all righteous. You look at a Jew, and it's not just a nice ethical thing to say, okay, I think you're a nice guy. We'll look at you. We'll judge you positively. It becomes a legal principle that Jewish law works with it. We look at Jews as individuals. Every individual Jew that you're going to look at and judge, we have to begin with the presumption of righteousness. Let's go to a few examples. And let's see how many examples we get through, because we have a half hour now. And this is a very powerful idea. Okay. We're talking about the laws of slaughtering animals. And the laws of slaughtering animals are not really civil law, right? They're religious law. But at the same time, there's a civil element within it. Why? There's a lot of trust. There's a lot of trust. According to Jewish tradition, and the reason why I want to specifically give an example of the laws of kosher meat and slaughtering is because Judaism sees it as a very high stake area. There's no bigger crime. I'm saying this is a big, big thing than a slaughterer swindling his community who he's servicing. Because the way it works is, in the process of slaughtering meat, there's a tremendous amount of trust you put into the slaughterer. And in a certain way, there's no way to disprove the slaughterer. If the slaughterer says the animal's kosher and I did a good job, it's his word. It's his word against nobody else. If he says it's not kosher, he has to be an honest man and report that he messed up the slaughter. It's very sensitive. And according to Jewish law, and this is traditionally, Jewish communities were more careful about who they hired as their slaughterer than who they hired as their rabbi. You didn't need the rabbi to be such a God-fearing Jew. I mean, you wanted somebody the slaughterer had to be the top, had to be a 10. There's no greater trust than the food and the kosher status that the slaughter is going to deliver to us. Now, why is that? Because the laws of slaughtering are very complex. It's not easy to become a slaughterer. It's a lot of laws. You need to literally know the anatomy of animals. And there's tremendous technique. If I open up a book and spend the next 3 months learning the laws of slaughtering, I can't go and slaughter an animal. Just like you can't become a heart surgeon by reading a few medical books. You have to have hands-on practice. There's a lot of technique. And there's a lot of law technique. You have to know you're doing it right. And there's a lot of trust because of that. So here's an example. The knife that the slaughterer uses must be So when you're slaughtering cattle, and I apologize if this is a queasy subject, hopefully not too much. The knife has to be, first of all, it's a massive knife. It's a real blade. And it has to be, according to Jewish law, 100% smooth and fine. There cannot be a nick. There can't be a nick on the entire knife. So what the slaughterer does between every single animal that it slaughters, it could be slaughtering, I don't know, dozens of cows in a day, every single time. The slaughterer does it, he inspects it with his eyes, and then you inspect it with your nail. You run your nail against the blade. You have to be very careful. Because the blade is so sharp, it could cut through skin like anything. You've never seen a blade as sharp as that. And it's feeling for even the slightest nick in the blade. And again, these nicks are not even sometimes visible. And if there's a nick there, you got to go and sharpen it until it's 100% smooth. So you're relying on the slaughterer to do a good job. If there's a nick, the animal is not kosher. It has to be a 100% smooth cut when you slaughter an animal. You cannot even apply pressure according to Jewish law. Of course, there's some pressure, but you don't push down when you're. So when we chop an onion in our kitchen, we don't just nicely graze it against the onion. You're not going to do anything like that, right? You got to go and apply pressure. You pull and apply pressure. The knife has to do the entire job with a cow. And you should know, researchers have looked into this and said that this is the most painless way to kill an animal. There's zero pain because you immediately cut off the blood supply to the brain. So it immediately loses conscious. It's the most painless way to kill an animal. I know, Debbie. I'll tell you something. When I was 11, my father was invited to a Jewish community in Iowa to go speak. And there's a very large slaughterhouse in Iowa, Postville, Iowa. And it made the news like 15 years ago. You remember that whole story? A horrible scandal.
Oh, yeah.
Horrible. One of the strongest cases of like legit systemic anti-Semitism in America to a scary level was that story. Crazy story. In any case, so they invited my father as a tour of the nation's largest slaughterhouse. I was an 11-year-old boy. I went with my father. It was my first time seeing a slaughterhouse, and I remember seeing how they slaughter cows. I was shaking. First of all, cows are a lot bigger than you think they are. They're bulls. They're massive, and the entire process it was like, whoa, this is wild. But what you see how the slaughters do it. It's very quick. According to Jewish law, if there's anything, even the most minor thing that gets in the way of the cut of the slaughtering, it's not kosher. So there's even a tiny pebble on the neck of a cow, and the slaughter feels it. The shochet feels it. He's doing the cut, and he felt a drop of resistance. But big deal. It still worked. The slaughtering happened. Not kosher. It has to be 100% smooth. And I'm just giving you a few examples. And all these things, and also especially then you have to go and do an internal inspection of the cow. Make sure there's no. The way it works is, according to Jewish law, if you find some type of internal defect or a growth or puncture in an internal organ, some type of sickness that would make that the cow would not be able to live for 12 months, it would die within 12 months, medically, then it's not kosher. Even though it was living and it was healthy, it looked healthy and you slaughtered it properly, if this cow medically would not be able to survive 12 months, it's not kosher. But how do all these things are tremendous training, and you trust a slaughterer on this. When a community hired a slaughterer. So if we lived 300 years ago, before the days of today's a whole different industry. Today's an industry, we go get meat, which was made and processed somewhere else in another state. But back in the day, it was a local slaughter, and there's tremendous trust. So I'm just giving you this entire introduction just to bring out to you the laws of slaughtering, and that you don't just hire a slaughterer just based on a resume. Oh yeah, you look nice. You got 3 years of experience in this city. You literally would go and do a serious background check. You want to make sure this guy has technique. You want to make sure this person is just impetuously honest and just a God-fearing person. Let's read text 9. Debbie, would you like to read? Text 9 will introduce us to the laws of kosher slaughterers.
Kosher slaughter qualifications. A Jew who doesn't know the laws of shechita may not slaughter. Any meat slaughtered by such a person is forbidden for consumption. Even a person who knows the laws of kosher slaughter should not slaughter alone before passing many times under the supervision of an expert scholar and achieving proficiency in the technique. Only a person who is well versed in the laws of Shechita has practiced under expert supervision until achieving proficiency is considered a qualified expert. Did I pronounce it as Shechita?
Shechita, perfect, that's it. According to Jewish law, a community is not allowed to just hire anybody. It's law. You must do a background check. You know, I don't know, some of you know, 2 summers ago, it was the first summer of COVID, so I was a director in one of the programs of the Chabad summer camp here in upstate Michigan. It was a wonderful experience. So every camp does criminal background checks on their staff. You legally need to. It's not just recommendation. It's not that a camp does it to protect themselves, just in case, God forbid, one of the staff are, I don't know, has a sexual predator history to them. Legally, you need to do it, right? So that's the point of it here. It's not just that communities wanted to do background checks on their slaughterers. Jewish law tells you, before you hire a slaughterer, you need to do a criminal background, not criminal background check, but you got to make sure that you know who you're getting. Jewish law now deals with the case. This was a setup for the law. Here's the law. Let's say somebody enters your town. Somebody's coming to visit. And the local slaughterer has the flu, doesn't show up. And the butcher needs a few cows to slaughter. And this guy says, you know what, big deal, I'll do it. I'm a slaughterer from the town over. And he goes and slaughters a cow. And then he just leaves, he's traveling in and out. Meaning this is the case. Again, law is that that's not the way things should happen. You don't just let somebody walk in and slaughter. But the question is practically, this guy just came and the guy just left. And we don't know where he is. We're not going to, we can't track him down. It's not like we have cell phones and this and trackers and, it was back in the old shtetl. People come, people go, nobody know where they came from, where they went to. And, people never knew, is this guy Elijah the prophet? or is he the idea of a traveling Jew and anonymity was a very real thing back then. And the idea of people moving communities to inflict personal exile, or where they wanted to become a new person, they felt, I want to move to a new community and he could, start fresh, a new reputation. It was a very real thing back then. So that whole idea, people just didn't know each other. I don't know anybody. Somebody just came. He looked like a nice Jew. Looked like a very upstanding individual. Slaughtered a cow. The question is simply, do we have to discard this cow, the slaughtered cow, or could we keep it? He looked like a nice guy. We inspect the slaughter. It looks good. What do you think? Based on what I told you, is this cow for the garbage? Or could we say, nah, you know what? Big deal, let's use it. Looks good.
Can't use it.
You can use it.
You say use it. Okay, who else says use it? Toby, you said use it?
Oh, I said can't.
You say can't. Very good. I like when there's differences of opinion. Toby says no, and you, Stuart, say that you could. Why do you say you could?
Because we've got a presumption of righteousness, and we're in a pickle, and
You're not in such a big pickle. I don't think it's a case of desperation.
right.
But there's a presumption. You're going to invoke the presumption of righteousness.
Yeah.
Very good. So you're saying the presumption of righteousness.
Rely on
We don't know who this guy was, but let's assume that he was, or let's presume, which is a stronger word, of course. It's a righteous individual. What do you say, Toby?
I think that it isn't keeping with the custom. We just shouldn't do it unless we know for sure that he's
legit. Yeah. So then there's another word thing we should say. You know what? Well, kosher and meat is such a sensitive thing. We really care in Jewish law about kosher food. We have a very high standard. We don't just let things fly. If we don't know who it is, just discard it.
Right.
Don't touch it. Who's with Toby? Who's with Stuart? Anybody? What do you guys say? You're biased.
I have no idea.
You don't
I don't know.
Anybody? What do you think? What do you think would be a legal answer? Let's read. This is the law. But I'm going to question the law, sir. I'm going to question the logic of the law. So let's read the law, and we're going to do a little bit of a Talmudic discussion following this. Text 10, page 178. Jeffrey, would you like to read?
If a Jew came and slaughtered an animal and left before we were able to determine whether or not he was a proficient practitioner, the meat may be consumed. The rationale for this law is that the majority of slaughter practitioners are experts.
Okay, so the Talmud says, this is actually Maimonides, this anonymous slaughterer comes in, slaughters, you're allowed to eat it. Why? Because there's an assumption. There's a presumption. People are good people. Slaughterers are good. Most people who are going to pick up called a chalif, the slaughtering knife. You're only going to pick it up if you're a professional. It's a safe presumption to make. Here's a question. Do you remember how chazaka works? A chazaka, something can only leave its default chazaka only when there's real proof, right? What is the default of a cow? What's the default of meat?
Not kosher.
Not the chazaka of meat is not kosher. How could you take meat out of the chazaka of not kosher? Only with real proof that it was slaughtered kosher. So the question here is, how is it enough to just say, well, people are usually good people? Which is an assumption. It's a guess. How could we invoke that? How is that strong enough to take meat out of its chazaka? The only way to remove something from its chazaka is with solid proof, not just with an assumption, a best guess, a safe guess. You understand the question? What do you say?
I understand. Something that you alluded to was what kind. Not some shlomios not just going to walk in, say I am a shoka and perform something that is putatively looks right.
Right.
And then the only thing that isn't right is everything falls into place completely. No one's got an incentive to lie about that. There's
Right,
the upside,
right.
and he apparently did it reasonably well, and it looked right. The results looked right. It's a 1 in a million chance that this is all malarkey.
Right. So this is a very high probability that this is legit.
Yeah.
At the same time, and that's not called proof. That's called circumstantial evidence.
Circumstantial evidence is better than direct evidence, in my view. Much better.
But circumstantial evidence at the end of the day is a guess, is a best guess.
I disagree 100%.
Okay.
100%.
By the way, this is a debate between modern secular law and Torah law. Torah law doesn't accept circumstantial evidence.
I've got a whole lecture that'll change every
So we'll have to save the lecture for another day.
Yeah,
But that's a fair point. I think that's a very fair point to
I'll change
debate.
your mind, I guarantee it.
You know what? Let's do it.
I would love to hear that subject. I would love
One day we'll do it. Is this enough? Is it enough to say we have a safe assumption? And we're literally, if you just go logically through this entire thing, it makes sense, this person is good. Is that enough to remove it from its chazaka? What is the legal principle? What's the legal logic that we are employing here to say that the meat could be kosher? So this is the text, and it's such a beautiful text because this text teaches us even more about this legal principle that every single Jew has the chazaka, has this legal presumption of being righteous. Would you like to read, Pam? Text 11, page 179.
We consider every Jew as certainly righteous. We are certain that they are particular about the laws of kosher slaughter and wouldn't slaughter if they weren't a qualified expert. As a result, we don't say that since there exists a minority of non-experts who slaughter, the animal remains in its established non-kosher status. Among righteous Jews, there is not even a minority that would act improperly. The minority of unrighteous Jews isn't a fact worthy of consideration because every Jew that has not been established as suspect must be considered as undoubtedly righteous. The presumption of righteousness is thus not just majority based. We know that there is an unrighteous minority present in the world at large. Every individual Jew that we are evaluating must be considered as certainly righteous without reservation.
Okay, so this is a little bit of a cryptic text, but I want to unpack this with you. What's this text saying? What this text is saying is, it's defining for us, what does it mean, this chazaka? Every Jew is righteous. Does it mean that we go by majority? Majority of Jews are good people. Majority of Jews will do the right thing. That's one way to look at it. Majority based, which means we'll simply look at what are the chances. 75% of the Jews are going to do the right thing. 25% of the Jews, we're suspect about them. 75% chance that this is okay. He says that's not what this is. And then he also says, maybe somebody could say, there's a lot of non-religious Jews out there. Maybe we can't trust non-religious Jews. You know why? Because they don't have our, there's like a religious argument. Religious Jews, we care so much about kosher food. And we know how sensitive this matter is. A non-religious Jew, we can't trust him. We can't trust her. So what does this text say? No. The fact that there's non-religious Jews has no bearing on this case. Why? I want you to follow this. He says we do not establish the chazaka of righteousness of every Jew based on majority. Yeah, most Jews do the right thing most of the time. It's not what we're doing over here. We look at every single Jew as an individual. Imagine you're the only Jew alive. Imagine you're the only human alive. We don't know who you are. Jewish law says the precedence is, the reality is, the chazaka is, you are righteous. Even if you're not religious, there's a righteousness. Every single Jew is given a sense of righteousness. Chazaka. Unless we have proof that says you're not chazaka. That's possible. A lot of Jews. And Jewish law talks about that. Sometimes it could be removed from your chazaka of righteousness just in one area. That's called like mumar, it's called a mumar, somebody who denies the laws of Torah, let's say in the laws of idol worship. So you could have a religious Jew, 100% religious, but they serve idols, which was a reality back in the day. That sometimes it can be a trusted Jew, but only not trusted in the area of anything that has to do with idol worship. Then you don't trust them. Certain sins, we say this is too big, it disqualifies them totally. But the point is, what this text is saying, this chazaka is not based on the majority. It's based on looking at every single individual privately, which is a very beautiful thing. We look at you as an individual, and we judge you not based on what most people do, what most people won't do. We look at you as an individual. And therefore, how does Jewish law say this? We know there's a Jew who came here and slaughtered. We don't know who this Jew is. We have no evidence about them. And if we could interview them, we would love to. And we would, if we were able to. If we were able to, we would interview them and only then make this piece of meat kosher. But right now, we don't have any other evidence. All we know, a Jew is here. What we say is righteousness. So we don't say it as probably righteous. We say certainly righteous. Every Jew has a chazaka. Every individual Jew has that chazaka. When he says it's religious or even irreligious. There's many more examples in Jewish law. I want to tell you one more example. What was that?
I have a question.
Sure.
So when you go to the grocery store and a food item doesn't have a hesher on it, you don't make the presumption, I don't have proof that this wasn't kosher. I mean, isn't that a different standard?
Okay, something that doesn't have a kosher symbol, we don't know if it's kosher.
You don't presume
No.
because you don't have proof.
Right.
You just
We don't presume what?
that it's kosher because you have no proof that it really isn't. Like you're saying you would presume in the case of the meat.
Okay, so meat is very different than a processed piece of food. Because once something is processed, we don't know anything about it. But something that has a default position, we could have a chazaka. We could talk about a chazaka. So, for example, I'm saying, meat is the example. You could apply it to anything else, when there's a chazaka. Anyways, the laws of chazaka are complex, but you need confirmation. A chazaka always works with what is the default. By default, processed food is not necessarily kosher. We need proof that it's kosher. We need a confirmation it's kosher. Okay. In any case, I want to tell you one law over here. Here, you ready for a crazy piece of law? And this goes back to the value. Maimonides writes this law, and of course this is from the Talmud. But the way Maimonides puts it is so striking. Maimonides speaks about the laws of divorce. So Jewish law believes in the sanctity of a marriage, and that a marriage should be happy and eternal. But of course, there's a way out, just in case any of the spouses feel that there's a legitimate reason to end this relationship. There's a way out, and there's a lot of laws about it. It's a contract. It's a legal contract, just like the wedding. There's a party, but there's a very heavy legal element to a wedding, a ketubah. It's a legal process. A divorce is an equal to that, and it's very serious. It's even more serious, because if it's not done properly, then this woman is really still married. And if she now enters relations with another man, that's a horrible offense, a married woman having relations. So it's considered a very, very high stakes legal process. According to the legal process, one of the elements of a divorce is that the husband needs to give the divorce willingly. It's a law. So for example, you can't bring a drunk husband who has no clue what's flying. He's drunk to the high heavens. You bring him into a courthouse, and you give him a piece of paper, give it to your wife, you're divorced. He doesn't know what's happening. It's just invalid. It has to be full choice, full volition. The Maimonides immediately right after that goes and starts saying, what about a husband who does not want a divorce? The wife wants it, and this relationship is broken, but we need his assistance here, or else it's not. That's just how. But he's just not cooperating. He doesn't want to show up. He doesn't want to give it. And we all know that this is right. This is something called aguna. You know about it. There's a problem. So Maimonides says Jewish law has no tolerance for that. And this is one of the few times Jewish law says use force. Use whatever method you need. You don't need to go to level 10 right away, but you put pressure. And begins with societal pressure. But you could even use physical force. It's one of the few times where Jewish law will tell you, if necessary, use physical force. Literally take him to the back alley and do whatever you need to do to get him, Judaism believes in torture in this case, which is fascinating. It's one of the Judaism will never use force. Never.
Ostracized him. I didn't know.
No, Maimonides says you do whatever you need to. And we know historically there's precedents that men were beaten over this.
Abraham Cohen, years ago, of blessed memory, he was on the bench, and he was in a position to put some muscle on a guy who wouldn't give a get. And the guy got religion pretty quickly because he was about to be sentenced. And Cohen said, I recommend that you sign this get. And he did. And they brought the rabbi out.
That is absolutely the way to do it. So you begin with societal pressure. You ostracize him. You don't let him get an aliyah. You don't count him for a minion. You don't let him use the city's bathhouse. There's a lot of things you could do, which does put a lot of pressure. That's how you begin. But if that's not working, you right away put on some more sanctions, right? Okay. But there's a very obvious question here. If you torture somebody into giving a get, is that called giving a get by their own volition?
No.
The answer is no, right? Like a forced confession, The Soviets would get people to give confessions, right? They said we could give a rock. That's what all the interrogators in the former Soviet Union would say. We in Russia, we could even get a rock to give a confession. That's how effective our torture methods are. So a man gives a get because you're literally beating the daylights out of him, and that's called a get that's being given with full choice. So this becomes a problem. Jewish law says the get has to be given with the intention to give it, and the choice and the volition and the conscious intention and consent of the husband. But then Jewish law says beat him up till he does it. One second. Which one?
Rabbi.
So one second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
It depends what your question is. What's your question?
Oh, what if a man wants a divorce and a woman doesn't?
Okay. So yeah, let's leave that for later.
Okay.
So how do we answer this question? Maimonides right away answers it. You know what Maimonides says? Really, he wants to give the divorce because every Jew wants to do every mitzvah. That's the essential nature of a Jew. Why is he saying no? Which means right now Jewish law wants him to give a divorce. If Jewish law wants him to do it, his soul wants to do it because every Jew has a pure soul. Why is he putting up a fight? That's the spirit of folly. It's the Yetzer Hara. But that's not who he really is. So when you force him to do it, it's really his actual real inner desire. Deep down, this is what he wants to do. And therefore, Jewish law says it's valid. It's crazy. We use that as a legal principle. So what I want to conclude with you like this is, I'm going to wrap up today's class and wrap up the course. You know, there's an idea that we all know. We all know it intuitively. Psychology speaks about this, about the importance of positive speech. And you know, especially when we speak with our children, when we speak with a spouse, whatever we say, whatever we project to other people, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if we tell somebody, you know, you're always late, you're always irresponsible, you always drop the ball, you know what chances are? That person is probably going to start embodying whatever you project onto them. That's the way people are. And if you tell them, you know, you're so talented, you're so good, you're such a special person, what happens? It brings out the goodness within that person. It's literally how things work. And they clearly see this, you know, with children, positive reinforcement. They've done studies about this. I'm going to tell you a true story about Mushki's grandfather. Mushki's grandfather, he was a brilliant man, but when he was a little child in school, he was looked at as a very weak student. And the teachers decided, let's just never ask him to ask a question. We'll never call on him. Never call on him. He went through years of school, and every single year the teacher told the next, you know, they go through the list of students, and he says, you know, so, and every year they would say, just don't ask Mendel Shem Tov, ask any questions. And he picked up on it, and he realized he's just a stupid kid. And one year, one teacher forgot to tell the next student the next thing. And the first day of school the next year, he's sitting in the corner, you know, spacing out because he's totally unengaged. And all of a sudden the teacher says, and Mendel Shem Tov, what do you think? His eyes lit up. He couldn't believe it. Wow, somebody, my opinion counts. And he said that was a turning point in his life. Can you imagine that? A teacher is showing him that he values who he is and is not going to get stuck in this bias that this kid is negative, you know. And we weren't saying it's a bad kid, just that he's a stupid kid. It literally, that was like a moment, a clear marker in his life, which is like so amazing. And I think a message that we have here, and I wish I had time to tell you the rest of the cases. You could read it on your own in the book. When you study Jewish law, especially these cases, civil law, what you're starting to see is, you know, Judaism believes in our essential goodness even more than something we believe in ourselves. And it cultivates that within us. It teaches us how to look at other people, teaches us how to look at ourselves. And we see Judaism doesn't just say it as an ethical, abstract thing. Oh, it's so nice to look at people nicely. This is legal stuff. This is like, you know, we really look at people this way. People are really good people. And in general, that's what Judaism does to us. Why do we study Judaism? Why do we study Jewish law? When we study Judaism, and what we've done in this course is, you're not just learning random information. You know, Jewish law. Okay, so you learn a bunch of law. That's pretty boring. But when you study Jewish law, you're actually learning attitudes. You're learning about life. You're learning about truth. You're learning how to process reality, how to think about things. And it changes us. It projects attitudes on us. It projects biases onto us. And all of a sudden we start thinking about life that way in a whole new way. So with that, I want to conclude. And I want to thank you all for joining this wonderful course. This was such a treat, such an interesting course, such a beautiful course. And I hope that it was a meaningful course. I hope it's going to leave you with a lot to think about. I hope it's going to change you. I hope this is going to infiltrate a little bit the way you think, the way you feel about life. And I look forward to studying with you again in the future. And dear friends, we have a course coming up very soon. Our Israel course, beautiful course where we're going to look at Jewish teachings with a very, very radical point of view and apply it to modern day Israel. So it's going to be very, very relevant, very powerful. We're going to go to areas and topics of Judaism we've never gone to before. We'll see how ancient wisdom really talks in a modern day, in a modern age, to modern problems. So I'm looking forward. And it's about Israel. It's a beautiful, beautiful course. We'll relive the 6-Day War. So I hope you'll all join us for that as well. And God bless you all. You have a wonderful summer. Happy July 4th. And thank you. Yashar koach to all you. Chazak, chazak.
Yashar koach.
So thank you to you all.